Here with John Wilkinson, a member of the transition panel, who's going to offer a few thoughts on things. And I asked the question of the Premier about the feeling of the breeders. And I know you're on the front line. You've been inundated with their thoughts on how difficult a situation they're left in. It's difficult to have confidence to invest money. What do you say to them?
Well, you know, this industry, as we said in our final report, has always been not driven by greed, but by hope. That is really the essence of horse racing. The people in it have to have hope. And what they were looking towards was a future which was a big question mark. And as a result, it was undermining the hope that normally fuels the industry. So I was particularly proud that our new Minister of Agriculture, Premier Wynne, would come today and say very specifically that she believes, as the Premier of Ontario, that there is going to be a sustainable horse racing industry in the province of Ontario, which I think is good news for breeders. That what needs to get done in short order is to determine which of our tracks want to be part of that new world. And I'm delighted that not only do we have Woodbine and Mohawk agreeing to be part of that new world, today we also have Grand River, Hanover, Clinton, and Western Fair that want to be part of that new world as well. And that there are negotiations ongoing right now with the other tracks in Ontario. So I think that is good news, but particularly the fact that she said that she gets our report, which said if you're going to have a vibrant horse racing industry, you need to integrate the policy around gaming, which most people see as OLG modernization, and what's going on at our racetracks, which is another historic form of gaming that has deep cultural roots in our province. So the fact that she has said that she's accepted our recommendation of October, that is important, I think is, as she said, I think a very strong, positive signal about that relationship between the government and the horse racing industry, which is part of the overall gaming industry here in the province of Ontario.
And I think the breeders can appreciate that, but they're going to take it right to ground level and say, look, we're in the breeding season now. I'm looking for something to really encourage me to reach in my pocket and or talk to my banker to help me get through to the future, and I'm struggling with the practicality of it.
Well, and I think as already been announced by the minister, we've had a HIP program in the province of Ontario. Prior to the cancellation of SARP, which is effective at the end of March, that was about a $45 million program. About $15 million of that, about a third of that money was coming from slots. That money's not there anymore. And it's really being driven, as you know, by the wagering through the pari-mutuel tax reduction. And what the Premier has said is that program will be $30 million. People can plan on that. If the wagering does not support that, the Government of Ontario will step in and support that so that program is $30 million. And that allows the ORC and our HIP advisory committees now to work together to come up with a program that makes sense, which is not a program that would support what was happening, but what's the HIP program we need going forward for the new industry.
And that'll have to happen quite quickly, given that we're at almost mid-March.
Well, absolutely, and I think that's why it is it's so important, because as the HIP advisories committees are looking at that, there was still a question mark about whether or not there actually would be racing. Would there be a racing season? Are there willing tracks to be one of the new world? Not all tracks are going to want to be part of this new world, but I'm just delighted that, of course, that 4 more not-for-profit tracks have said we want to be part of that world.
So we have half a dozen tracks. We know there's going to be racing, but we don't know how many days of racing at this point.
Well, what we've said is that for this year going forward, as a reflection of the marketplace, it should be about 800 race days, and that is concurrent with what Oriah was talking about when Stan Sadinsky did a report last fall as well, that really represents the size of the industry based on the market, about the people who actually bet on horse racing, not the people who have nothing to do with horse racing, but they wanted to play the slots somewhere in the province of Ontario. So we've said that a sustainable industry, of course, would be based on the marketplace, and as a businessman, to me, that's always a requirement.
But at the moment, with half a dozen tracks, there's not going to be 800 days of racing.
Oh, no, the commitment is to have 800 days of racing. The question is where. And obviously, you can't have race days if you don't have a track that wants to participate in transition funding. Or they also can decide that they don't want to be part of transition funding, but they want race dates. Ultimately, where the races go, as everyone in the industry knows, is determined by the Ontario Racing Commission, because they have the legislative authority to determine race dates.
Okay. Very good. Well, thank you for the clarification.
Great. Thanks so much.
Okay. Harold Howlett, John Wilkinson. We're here now with Dr. Ted Clark, General Manager of Grand River Raceway. Coles Notes version of what you thought happened today?
Well, I think we learned that we have a base from which to start again with racing here. For this facility, we hope to race 50 live days this year. We don't know when the first day is. We don't have a schedule. Obviously all of that has to be approved by the commission. But
see any reason why 50 wouldn't work?
Well, the difficulty is when you reduce race days, you reduce total wager. That's a concern. The fact of the matter is that's all we can afford to race, and we're hoping to make a success of that.
Do you have a reasonable sense of what the purse structure would be?
No, I don't. That will depend, I think, upon not only what we can make here, but what is left in, quote, stranded purses around the province, which I cannot define.
I've commented several times here today about there seems to be something on the table for the track operator, something on the table for the people who race horses, but the breeders seem to be at the back of the bus in this. They're asked to buy in simply on the notion that there's a future, period.
Yes, I wouldn't disagree with that assessment of things. I do think that without tracks racing, which is where we were 4 weeks ago, there wouldn't have been a place to race horses this summer. And so in the immediate short term, we have made things better. Is it going to be the full answer? No, it isn't. But on the other hand, if you look at the breeding industry in France or in Sweden, where there is an integrated policy, you start to see a very different picture. And that's going to take time. That isn't something that is going to be right immediately. So I suppose even that may be not much benefit to the breeder.
It's just they struggle right now saying, how do I justify investing? If I can invest, how can I justify breeding? I had one gentleman say to me, you know what, this is looking suspiciously like New Jersey, where their breeding industry is virtually gone.
Yes. Well, it's interesting you raise that. I spoke to a breeder not long ago, a young man who's over the last 10 years invested a lot of money in horses and has been developing a breeding operation as well. And he called, actually just prior to the last Standardbred Advisory Committee meeting, and after that meeting I reported to him what I had learned at the meeting. And he said, well, I think I'm going to breed in Ontario. I know that I can get to one of the stallions I couldn't get to last year, and I see this as being an opportunity where a lot of people are slowing down, and sometimes that's the best time to be going forward. So there is more than one point of view on that whole issue, and I guess I know he's only one, but I wouldn't be giving up the torch. As I said to you before, I started in Elmira when our assets were not even half of our debts, and so there is a it's possible to get out of things.
So from the track perspective, though, now it's a case of hurry up and try and get these dates settled. That's your number one priority, because we're second week of March.
Yes, and obviously by this time last year we would have sent out all sorts of promotions to people to come here to eat and so on, making them aware of what we were doing and all that sort of thing. We haven't published a schedule yet, so we can't do any of those things. And so we have many things that we have to get in place very quickly, and hopefully we'll get that done.
Well, thanks for sharing your thoughts, and let's hope we keep moving forward from here.
Thanks for coming. I really do hope that this at least starts us moving forward.
Harold Howe with Dr. Ted Clark.